Hi everyone, welcome back to another Moving to Canada live session. I'm Rebecca here with Stephanie, and today we're diving into a question that we've been hearing nonstop. Will the CRS score cutoff finally drop below 500 this year?
Yeah, it's definitely a hot topic right now. I'm seeing this everywhere across like Reddit and our social media platforms that we have. It's obviously the hot topic for those in the express entry pool under the Canadian experience class for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
I've just pulled the numbers up in front of me. The last draw, or the last time we got a look into the pool, there were 22,591 candidates in the 501 to 600 range, and then another over 77,000 between 451 and 500. So there's a lot of people who are right up there with scores that would have been historically quite competitive. With that said, the scores recently have been historically high and people are anxious, and we get it. So we did take a deep dive into the latest pool data, and we modeled out some scenarios for everyone that we hope will give a little bit of clarity. I do want to go in first with the caveat. As always, we don't have a direct line to IRCC. We don't know when the next draw is. We can guess based on trends, but they can and have been changing their minds and not following trends for a lot of the time this year. We don't know what their next move is, but they've said 2025 would focus more on in-Canada candidates. We've seen that in the last few draws, but before that, we hadn't consistently seen that reflected in the draw activity. Yeah, so with that said, we've got some freshish pool data from July 6th, and it gives us some insight into what's actually going on behind the scenes in Express Entry and in the Canadian Experience class in Canada.
Yeah, and I think that data, it makes more sense in light of the fact that we did have those two CC draws just before that update. So it helps us kind of play with the numbers a bit.
Yeah, exactly. That draw in June that you mentioned, it invited 3,000 CEC candidates. It was the first large one that we saw in months. There had been months of inactivity, and then we saw one draw of around 500 invitations, which didn't give us too much insight into what was happening in the pool. But the first draw that we saw where 3,000 C candidates were drawn out, it actually caused a drop in the express entry pool, which is what everyone was hoping to see. I think we can say that fairly universally. The drop was specifically at the 501 to 600 CRS range. And it moved from around 25,000 candidates in that range to 22,900 at the time we saw the next draw. It would have dropped by the 3,000, but then grown by 900 in that period of time. So that was a real shift after like the months that we were seeing of the pool just getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I think what everyone expected to see after that draw would be for a similar drop to happen. So the pool was at 22,900. I think a lot of people were hoping to see that drop to somewhere around the like high 19s, low 20s. But that's not what happened. The July 6th data, as I said earlier in the call, the number of candidates in the 501 to 600 range had only dropped by 356. So that's after 3,000 people were drawn from the pool. In other words, the pool really hadn't changed very much, even with 3,000 candidates pulled from the pool just 2 weeks earlier.
Almost like one of the things that's keeping the CRS cutoff so high is just the volume of people entering the pool again. They're entering quickly and replacing anyone that's been selected, right?
Yeah, either entering or the first of the month happened during that period. So that would have been when people got the CRS bump for an additional year of Canadian work experience.
Or profile expiry and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly. If we do take a look at the average growth stats between June 11 and June 22, we saw about 81 candidates per day enter the 501 to 600 range. This is obviously an average. We don't know how many people entered each day. It could have been 1,000 one day and very few the next, but it's about 81 on average. But between June 22 and July 6th, that number jumped to 188 per day. So that's over 108 more per day entering the pool during that period. Yeah, that is what outpaced the impact of the draws. When we dig into what this actually means for future CRS cutoffs, we modeled some different scenarios based on draw sizes and pool growth. So again, like we can't control what IRCC does in terms of invitations, but if we assume 3,000 candidates every other week, based on what we've been seeing over the last little while.
For CEC, right?
Yes, for CEC. The three models that we pulled out. So if we see 80 people per day entering, like what we saw in June, cutoffs by the end of the year could drop to around 495. At that rate, the people getting drawn from the pool would outpace the number of people entering the pool at the 500 plus range. So if that were to continue, and I say that is a big if because that's not what we saw between June and July, we could potentially see cutoffs below 500. Again, like this does have some assumptions in there. The assumption is that a lot of the candidates are CEC and not federal skilled workers. There will be some that are federal skilled workers. We don't know what that is, but I am just letting you know what it would take for it to drop below 495. And that's a pretty low number of CEC candidates entering the pool each day compared to what we did see between the last two draws. If it stays at 550 per day, scores may stay at the 510 plus range. So we might still see the drop like we've been seeing between draws at the moment, but I wouldn't expect it to drop again below the 500 range, which is what a lot of people are really hoping for. And if it does stay at 220, or if it gets to 220 a day, so if the rate accelerates and we see more people entering the pool at the 501 plus range than what we're currently seeing, then the scores will likely stay at 515 plus as a minimum.
It's kind of crazy to see those numbers or hear those numbers, considering just thinking about how much the express entry system has evolved over the years, and a score of 495 was considered incredibly strong a few years ago. So basically, unless pool growth slows down significantly, draw sizes increase, or another factor like people enter but they are less qualified, it's unlikely that we're going to see a cutoff below 500. And if it does, it's going to be marginally below 500. We're talking 495.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's an assumption, but I do think that it is something that we're seeing. The volume of high scoring candidates that we are seeing entering the pool, it is going to take consistent large CEC draws to start pulling the score down. But the bottom line is you can't control how many people are entering the pool at any score range, low, high, medium. What you can do is control your own profile. And I think we're seeing with a good chunk of the people who are entering the pool at the 501 range between draws, I think they're taking control of their own profile. I think they're making changes that over time mean that they're in a better place to get more points.
Definitely. I think you made a really good point just there that I'm going to lean into. Over time, whatever you do, I don't think is going to have an instant impact. It's really like a time investment of how you use your time and how you choose how you can most effectively use your time between now and say the end of the year to maximize your points, knowing that it's not going to happen overnight. I think that's really important because often we just expect instant kind of reward, but that's not the case here. So if your score isn't competitive right now, again, taking control, there are things you can do. So max out your language scores. So if your first language is English and you have some points available, work at boosting that and seeing how many points you'll get if you score CLB level 10, for instance. Work towards that. The same with French language. If you can use the time or some time on an evening to learn French language, people are doing that. And I know it's hard to commit to learn a new language, but people are doing it and it's paying off. Consider more education. If you're on the cusp of the higher education or you've done credits towards something, consider finishing it off. Again, that's a long-term plan, but it could pay off in the future if you work out, okay, so what would it mean for me to get a postgraduate diploma? How would that significantly impact my points, if at all? Those are the kind of things you need to be thinking about. Diversify your work experience if you can. And what I mean by that is, say, if you qualify for Canadian experience class, work out whether it's more beneficial for you to continue gaining Canadian experience, or in some cases it could be worth you working in Canada remotely for a foreign company to gain foreign work experience. Again, very much depends on your situation and your particular attributes. Don't do both at the same time. I'm not saying work Canadian experience less and foreign work experience at the same time. I'm not saying that, but decide which one would be better. Do some kind of modeling. And also explore category-based draws. And I'm not just referring to French here. There are some occupations targeted in category-based draws which have a lower barrier to entry. But saying that, if you're kind of committing to a new career move over 6 months, you could also learn French, which if we look at 2025 to date, there's been considerably more French draws than any other category. So that time might be better spent learning French. But all that to say is very specific to your own merits as to how you should use your time. There's not many people that can just enter the pool and know they're going to get an ITA in the next round. It's not normal now that you would just enter the pool and everything work out great. You have to work at it to get those points that you want to get.
Yeah, and the playing around with the points is exactly where our CRS calculator thrives, really. It's easy to use. It lets you model real life sort of what if scenarios. So you can tweak your language scores and see what impact that would have on your CRS score. You can add education, you can add work experience. You can see what difference it makes if you have foreign work experience versus Canadian work experience, because those aren't all scored equally. And playing around with our calculator, it instantly lets you see the impact on your CRS.
So just to recap, we might see CRS scores dip below 500, but that's only if pool growth slows down, and IRCC do keep up with regular CC specifically draws. And in the meantime, you really should focus on what you can control, so your language, work experience, education, and definitely check out our CRS calculator. We'll send a link in the comments because that can really help you work out where you should be spending your time.
Yeah, I didn't see it pop up. So Rachel, she's in the back end helping us with this as always. If you could just drop the link to the CRS, and otherwise we're happy to answer your questions. So just drop those in the comments.
Perfect. And thank you everyone for tuning in, and we shall see you next time with some important updates for you.
Bye.
Bye.